Alright, so in this tutorial I'm going to be walking you through how to set up instance object types. These are a very useful object that lets you create a template, dynamically link it to an instance object, and then very quickly modify the source and see things update in real time on the instance objects themselves. This is useful when you have a small template and you want to copy this lots of times. Not only is it convenient in terms of workflow, but it keeps your scene very lightweight and very fast, which is going to be helpful down the line. The one drawback that fixtures or instances do not have is that they do not allow you to set a device or fixture offset. So with fixtures you have your channel universe subnet net. However, with instances you don't really have that option. That's one of the reasons why they're so fast, is they don't have all the overhead that you normally have. So what these will do is they'll stack on top of each other without any gaps in between, and then you set your offsets on the master fixture, which in this case we've named main. So that's it for the introduction, and let's clear our scene and kind of start over from scratch. Alright, so with a blank scene like this, we want to do a couple things first. So the first thing we want to do is create a fixture. We can place this in the center, and let's go ahead and call this fixture main. And then with that there, let's go ahead and create another fixture. And we can right click to place it at the center, and we'll call this one template. And with these two fixtures down, we need to configure a few more things before we continue. Main is going to overlap with template eventually when we get started with the address offsets. So let's go ahead and get ahead of ourselves here, and for main, let's just go ahead and put it on universe 2. The reason why I'm choosing universe 2 for main and template is set on the default of 1 is because main is going to grow and shrink as we increase and decrease our offsets, and this will keep things from overlapping down the line. Alright, so with that done, let's go ahead and grab our template and let's create some pics for us to see. I'm going to put this on a different location here in the viewport so we don't have too much stuff going on in the center. Let's go ahead and just type in -400, and with that selected, go into hull mode, and we'll go into hull add, and by holding S on the keyboard we can just click on the icon, and we'll do it one more time. So we have two hulls, and the second hull selected. Let's just type in 100. And this is going to be a very simple fixture. You might want to do a more complex fixture. You might be doing a grid. It's really up to you. I'm going to do a select all here. You can click it here as well, and do a generator from selection. So with that said and done, our template now has 10 pics, and each pics is red, green, blue. And our generator has set up some other things with our fixture as well, such as chan order. Generators, in case you didn't know, have a chan order here which specify what gets generated. And the template receives that. After you generate, it fills in these settings for you automatically. That is not the case on main since we have no generator attached, so we actually need to fill this out ourselves. So for chan order, let's just type in the same thing we have for our template, which is red, green, blue, and there we go. We're pretty much set up and ready to go. The next thing we want to do is go back to the Create tab and create an instance object. We'll place this somewhere on our grid. Right there seems fine, and let's go ahead and even out our numbers here. Let's just type in 200 for TZ. And now that we have our instance object down, which is a feather icon, we need to do a couple more things to link everything together. So the way this works structurally is we have the template object that is going to be referenced by the instance object, and the instance object will be referenced by the main fixture. So the way we link things to the the instance object is quite simple. Over here under source, we can change the default of the child marker here to the actual name of the object. So in this case it's just template. And so now that we've specified that, you can see we have a line here but no pics, and that's because the instance is basically linked to the template, but the instance itself is not attached to anything, therefore nothing is rendering its data. So the way we do that is pretty simple. We just need to parent instance 1 to main. So we just drag this onto main, and right away we see that we have pixels showing up, and it just says 10 pics up here, and that means we're pretty much good to go. So at this point, this could be all you want to do. You might just want to have one instance, but you probably want to have more. So one thing you could do is take that instance and you can duplicate it several times. And as you duplicate it, you'll see that the pick strand is actually connected into one long strand, and you'll see that main is 60 pixels long, and you have 6 instances of 10 pixels each. So this is kind of how this works. So you can duplicate things manually if you'd like. You can rotate each of these instances. You can scale them as well. But we're not going to do any of that here. We're actually going to delete everything but fixture or instance 1. And with instance 1 selected, let's go ahead and take a look at our array options here over here in the bottom right. So something that instances could do that's very useful, probably the most useful attribute about them, is copying their data into some kind of array. So if we type in 10, for example, under array count, we can increase something like translate, and you'll see that we're now copying the instance data multiple times, 10 times over, and moving it over by this amount each time. So since our grid units are default to 100 centimeters, we could type in 100, and we would get a copy every grid unit. So this is pretty useful. You can also do things like rotate. So since this x-axis here, which is red, is our x, and we can type in a rotation value for that, we can actually rotate things around the axis as well. And this may be useful if you're doing an installation or a project where you have a lot of small fixtures that are all part of the same data chain. However, you have some kind of geometric alignment or layout. And you can chain these things together pretty easily. So you can also increase the TY value. You can also do scale. This may not be as useful, but it's there in case you want to play with it. So that's all good and well. One cool thing though you can do that may help you even more is to adjust the relative pivot. So here we have a rotate Y, and if we increase this, we're actually not going to see a result. Let's type in 22.5. And the reason why we don't see a result, even though we have obviously a lot of copies up here, is because we're rotating it around its own central origin. Its own central origin is actually right at the icon here, which means it's not rotating it anywhere that you can see it. It's all kind of stacked on top of itself. So the way we fix this is by adjusting the relative pivot to something that is not 0, 0, 0. So we can take the Z and actually offset this in this direction by 200 units. 200 centimeters will get it actually right back at the origin, and you'll see what that does here when we do that. By typing in negative 200, which is the inverse obviously of 200 up here, we've placed our pivot point back at the center of the grid, and now we have a nice little circular arrangement that is also linked to our instance just like before, and we can modify the instance and see how things change. And this kind of brings us back to the point we were at when the video started. One last really cool feature that you can do with instances is you can actually instance instances. So you can actually layer the instancing process and nest it as deeply as you want. This allows for a little bit more flexibility and dynamic kind of control of your arrays. So for example, let's go back to our template and let's take our hulls. Let's go ahead and get rid of this one so we just have one, and then let's go ahead and go back to object. Let's take our generator and let's go ahead and change this to grid. And with that instance or set up properly, we can actually set the X count to something else. Let's just go ahead and set it to 4 or maybe 6, and let's go ahead and type our pitch into 10. So we have a little bit less pixels, but we're going to be replicating this, so you'll see immediately over here we've already got copies that's going around in a circle. But let's say we want to make like a video wall, some kind of a low-res surface of LEDs made up of these segments. So with our template defined and a little bit different, we can actually go back to our instance object, and let's go ahead and set our array count to 8, and let's go ahead and reset everything else. So we can take our tx value over, and let's just keep going until we've got something that looks relatively consistent in terms of the spacing. We don't have to get too exact for this tutorial, but you can see here the gap here is now roughly the same as the gap here. So if you were building a large array, this would actually be a way to get like a consistent spacing. So with that row done, what we want to do is we want to duplicate this and go vertically as well. And like I showed you before, we can duplicate this, and this is totally acceptable if you would like to do this, but there's also another way to do this with fewer nodes and a little bit more dynamic flexibility. So let's go ahead and duplicate instance 1, but instead of just leaving it here, let's go ahead and parent it to instance 1. So we have instance 2 parented to instance 1, and instance 1 parented to main. And this gets a little bit more confusing, but basically what you're doing is instance 1 is instancing whatever 2 is generating. And so for this to work, we actually need to change one setting on instance 1. So source is set to template, but we don't want to source template. We want to source the child of instance 1. And so to do that, we just right-click on source 1 and reset this to child. And with that done, we can change some of the parameters. So instead of relative transform x, let's do 60 on y. And that will give us basically one big array, and this would be a very easy thing to adjust on the fly. Let's say you deselect this, and let's go ahead and turn off the visibility for these. You'll notice that we have kind of a crazy mess of wires here, and this is because the pixel chain is being rendered throughout this entire array. If you wanted to turn that off so you just saw pixels, you could actually go ahead and turn that off over here under Fixtures, turn off hull curves and pix curves respectively, and you deselect, and you're basically just looking at the actual pixels. So that's pretty nice, and that's looking pretty good. If we wanted to, say, change the density of this array, that's a very easy thing to do. We just go over here to template, and we type in, generator, we want to type in a new x count and y count. So let's go and type in 10 and 10. Now I also want to reduce the pitch because the panels are now bigger than they used to be. So I think if we type in 6, that will get us non-overlapping. Let's see if my math is right. Yeah, it looks like it's about right. Okay, so that gives you the basic idea there. It's very easy to go back and modify the source, and everything else gets updated accordingly. You can even go in here and grab individual pics, and you can move them around. This probably has limited usefulness, but you have full control over the template, and the main fixture will update accordingly. One last thing to show you, because this is actually quite useful as well. Let's go ahead and expand our setup a little bit and make a projector. Let's go ahead and fit our projector to our big main fixture here. So the way we do this is quite simple. We grab main, and then we shift or control select projector 1, and we can do a fit to selection. And once we've done that, let's just scoot this back a little bit, and we can do a fit aspect X so that we have a square aspect. And with that done, let's go ahead and just use a constant color, because I'm just going to show you some masking tricks here. We'll use red. And with that kind of set up, we can now see very clearly each and every pix, right? We can see the array, how dense it is, etc. So if we go back to our template, and we go back to pix, and let's go ahead and zoom in on this. What we want to do is select some stuff and make a mask. So I'm going to go ahead and make a very simple mask. It's going to be just an edge, a border like this. And with those selected, we can go to Fixture Editor, and we can just type in a name. We'll call this border. And maybe we also want to do something different, maybe like a cross formation. And then we can call this cross and create that one as well. And you can check out some of our other videos on the mask and fixture editor. It's a pretty comprehensive section. So kind of with that done, we can zoom back out and we can grab our projector and open up the mask palette. And you'll see that the two masks we created are now globally available in GeoPix. So what we want to do is just go ahead and choose one of these, and our projector is now only applying content to the mask called border. We can also do this with cross. So we can also have them both on, and you'll notice that we kind of composite the masks together, and this is something that you can play around with in the projector settings, but we have a mask mode down here, union and intersection, so you can do some pretty cool stuff with that. And by using an array with instances instead of one big fixture, you're able to create masks with much less nodes selected or pixels selected, because you're only dealing with the template, not the overall. So that's pretty much all there is to show there. There is one last thing that might be useful to people who are creating objects this big. So let's go back to our generator and let's do 6, 6, 10, 10. Let's actually reduce this even more. Let's go ahead and go with 3. And let's go ahead and click regenerate. Alright, so we have a very small, or a number of pixels now. We can actually increase the pitch a little bit more. There we go. And the reason I reduced that is because currently a fixture is capped at 4,000 pixels roughly. If you go over that, you're going to have issues. So you want to keep it below that per fixture. But let's say we have this fixture, but we really want manual control over these pixels. We want to kind of convert this down to its own fixture without the instances even in the picture. You can do that quite simply by scrolling down here under Tools to merge selected fixtures and just clicking that once. And once you've done that, you'll have a new fixture here called Combined Fixtures. We can go ahead and turn off all of this other stuff, and you'll see that we have this fixture here. We can move it around and rotate it. It's no longer tied to the instances. You can go in here to Pix mode, and you can actually marquee select whatever you want. And so once you've done this, you lose the editability, but you gain some of the granular edit capabilities if that's important to you. And so basically that's the end of this tutorial. If there's anything else you'd like to see, let me know, and hopefully that was helpful. Thanks a lot.